Hello, my name is Scott Robinson. I'm a front-end web development, Angular, and Ruby on Rails mentor and course writer at Thinkful. Today I wanted to go a little bit over one of the topics that a lot of my students have issues with, which is the issue of Git and GitHub. So I want to talk about some of the differences between them, how I use them, and how the course tells you, how to complete some of the ways that the course as you use them. And hopefully we can get past some of these issues that a lot of students are having, and you'll be able to enjoy the value of Git in the future. So first off, I'd like to talk about Git. Git is essentially a program that lives on your computer. And that's really all it is. It has a lot of power, and in that way it also has a lot of confusion. There are so many different things you can do with Git, and to be honest, most of us only barely scratch the surface, and that's really all you need to know to be proficient with it. So Git is a version control system, which means that it basically, as you're going along, you go through this process of committing your files, which basically is like, in a way, hitting the save button on your project. The difference is that it saves, unlike Microsoft Word or some other program. If you save something and then you change it and you save it again, you can't go back to what you had saved before. So that's one of the really powerful features. Another really powerful feature is that multiple people can be working together on something at the same time. And it will merge their changes in together. So let's take the same scenario. If you have a Word document or something and you send it to someone else in an email, and then you go and you make some changes and they make some changes, there's no real easy way to get the two of them to blend together. You pretty much have to manually go through, look at their changes, look at your changes. They may have improved this, and there may be some special new feature or something that they've added to programs like this, but in general you really have to either manually do it or heaven forbid somebody edits the file and deletes a bunch of stuff and you place it over top of it and save it and it's gone. So what Git does is it merges things together in a really nice way and allows you to see the differences of things as that's going on. That may be covered in the future. But at the moment, I just wanted to go over the really basic stuff that you're going to be doing in the courses, as well as a really good workflow for getting this down, learning these really simple commands, and being able to be proficient with it enough so that you can, save your work, get it up on GitHub, and do other things like that. The other distinction and the disclaimer to this is Git, again, is very powerful, so it has many different ways to do the exact same thing. One of the things that you'll notice, or you may notice throughout the course, is that some of the commands may look a little bit different than some of the commands you've seen before, and if you're asking questions on Slack or talking to mentors, or your mentor may give you a slightly different command than you've seen in the course. Just know that there's a lot of different ways to do the exact same thing. So the commands that we give you may look a little bit different, but they're probably doing the same thing behind the scenes. The way that I use Git is, usually the way that I instruct my students to, and I do it in this way so that it does exactly what you think it should do, without any trickery or anything, and pretty much guarantees you're always going to be saving everything all the time. Okay, so before we get back to that, we're going to talk about GitHub. Now, GitHub is a website. That's really all it is. It is separate from Git in the fact that the two do not actually link or are tied together. You can't access, your profile or anything like that from Git. They are completely separate in that aspect. They're joined in the way that GitHub is a remote. So in Git, there's a concept of a remote, which means that you can save things locally, and then you can push them to another computer somewhere else to save it there. It's kind of like using cloud storage, or so Apple users will know of iCloud, Windows users will know of OneDrive. There's also very popular Dropbox, things like that. You're putting things into somewhere else that you can save them and access them again from anywhere else. That's really all GitHub is just a these concepts are known as repositories. So GitHub is simply just a repository for your code files. But as you'll notice, it seems like they're connected, and that's because they work together very closely. However, they are very different. Okay, so what we're going to do here is I'm going to go through the two different ways that the course will ask you to do things, and the order in which to do them. So, way number one is it tells you to create a empty folder. So we're going to make dir a folder, we'll call it demo. So we enter that in. If we look at our stuff, you will see that we have a demo folder in here. So we're going to go into our demo folder, and you can see that there's nothing in there. Another really helpful tip is ls -a. What that gives you, sorry, ls negative, yes, no, yes, that's correct, ls minus small a. And what that means is show me everything, including hidden files and folders. Now, without going into too much detail, one period means where I am at. And another, where is it? I don't know. There's a bunch of different commands. And the two dots mean the parent folder. Okay, so we'll clear that again. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop a file into that demo folder. So now when we look at it, there's actually a script.js file that's in there. Okay, so now that we've got our file, let's just pretend this is a full website or whatever project we're working on. We need to get it up to GitHub. Well, first way it tells you to do that is to run git init. So if you run git init, it says initialize an empty Git repository, which is great. So now if we use that magical command, there it is, you'll see that we have a .git folder. This folder is where all of Git stores all its information. This is the magic thing that tells you whether you are or are not in a Git repository. It's also how it knows what Git repository you're in. Now you also see this random .ds store file in here. That's a Mac thing. It just creates those randomly, and they're usually really annoying. Another way to handle that is we're going to create a .gitignore file. So if we vim a .gitignore file, and you can also just do this in your text editor, Sublime, or any other application you prefer to use, we can put in .ds store. And once we do this, what happens is that the git status, which is a great command to run, does not show that .ds store file anymore. And what I actually probably should have done is shown you the difference before it. So let me go back. I'm going to remove the .gitignore file, ignore, and we run git status again, and you'll see that now there's that annoying .ds store file in there. Now this doesn't just have to do with the .ds store file or anything like that. You can hide any file from being committed into your repository if you would like. So you can put anything in there, including folders, and there's a whole language of how to represent different things in your files that I'm not going to get into. Okay, so running git status is one of the very best things that you can do with Git in its entirety. Running git status will tell you what branch you're on, tells you what your current commit is, it tells you what your untracked files are, it also tells you about modified files and changed files and stuff like that. So if we open, let's do, well, without getting too complex or technical, let's go ahead and create that file again. Sorry. We will hide that file because it can be in the way. Alright, so now when we run git status again, you will see that there is no longer the .ds store file there, even though if you run the command, it actually tells you that yes, that file is in fact in your folder. Now another thing you'll notice is that it doesn't show up here. That's because it has the dot in front of it. So the .git folder, the .dsstore folder, and the .gitignore file do not show up in your Finder window. There's a way to turn that on if you'd like. That's again, just Google for that. In Windows as well, that works the same way. The dot files, any file starting with a dot, does not show up naturally in Windows Explorer. So you need to, using the command line is the best way to figure out what is actually inside of your files or your folders. Okay, so now that we've created a Git repository that's local on your computer, and the next thing we want to do is add the files. And again, Git tries to help you out as much as it can, and it tells you these little helpful hints. You know, untracked files, use git add to include what will be committed. And you can run exactly what this says. You can say git add.gitignore, and it will add the gitignore file. What does that look like? It looks like it's green, and it says new file. And it also tells you how to undo adding it in case you ever need to. So the command that I use, and this is one to write down, so if you're following this with pen and paper or making notes, this is the note to take. Git add -A. Now what this means is I want to add everything that is in this folder. So it doesn't matter if it's new, it doesn't matter if it's a change, it doesn't matter if you deleted something. You want it to add any changes, additions, new files, anything to your Git repository. So when we run git status here, you'll see that now that script.js file has been added. So you don't have to add them one by one. You can use that command to add everything all together. And again, you may have seen different commands used by mentors or other things. There are lots of different ways to do things. This is just one. Okay. So once you've added the files, the next thing you need to do is commit. Changes to be committed. So it means you have not yet committed these files. So we're going to run git. So here's the second command to write down if you're taking notes. Git commit -m hello world, or whatever your comment is. I usually don't take these too seriously when I'm developing at home. Usually it's the pizza guy's at the door or something funny like that, because I'm not too serious of a person if you see me on Slack. So when we run this command, you'll see that it gives the what we call the commit ID, which you should not usually need to be worried about, but if you ever need it, there are ways to get around to get to this. There's some other tools I'll probably do in future videos. And then it tells you your Git's message, and it tells you a little bit of what happened. So 2 files were changed and 50 insertions. And then it tells you create mode something something and gitignore. What this means is really just look at the first word, create gitignore. So it created a file called gitignore inside of its memory. Think of this as its snapshot. It's not, you obviously created the file ahead of time, but this is creating it within its snapshot or its memory or recollection of what your files are. Alright, so now that we've added the files to the commit, if we run git status, we get on branch master, nothing to commit, working directory clean, which means all of your changes have been successfully added to here. Now Git automatically tracks all your files, so if we were to go in to our script.js file and change something, you will see that if we run git status again, it now says it's modified. So let's go ahead and commit this modified change. So again, that second command was git. Now remember, we need to add. So every single time, every single time that you need to do something, if you see something in red here in your in git status, it means you need to add first. So git add, we'll do the -a to tell everything. run git status again. You don't have to run the git status in between every one. I'm just showing you the changes. And then we run our git commit -m and broke the code. Okay, so now again run git status. Okay, so now great, we've got 2 changes in here, and you know, we're ready to go ahead and push this up to GitHub because this awesome code is totally working. Not. Alright, so in order to do that, that means we need to create a repo. So this is the next step that it asks you to do in the course, is to create a new repo. So you click create new repo and new repository. Give it a name, we'll call it demo, make it public if you want, and then you can initialize this repository with a README if you would like. Highly recommended, although if you're just working on projects by yourself, you don't have to do that. Add a .gitignore, you can, if you'd like, pick one of these for any of the languages or projects that you're doing. As you can see, there's a lot of options here, and it basically just hides, it has automatically hiding all the files that usually come with these types of projects that are not important to be sharing with other people. Usually languages like C or C++, it's the binary files, stuff like that. Alright, but since we've already added our own, you don't need to do that. A license could be, usually things have the MIT license or the Apache license, things like that. There's lots of different licenses in here, and it's basically like giving permission to people or explaining what that permission to people to use your code is. They also have this nice little helpful, I don't know what to do, and it will tell you exactly what to do. Okay, none of that is required, however. So we're going to create this repository, and you'll see it created a brand new repository with a README. Okay, so now that we have our repository over here in our GitHub account, and we have our code over here, we need to get our code from here over to here. So the next command it asks you to run in the course is git remote add origin http github.com, your username, and your repository name. Press enter, and you will now have a remote. You can check your remotes by running git remote. Tells you what your remotes are. You can get more information by running git remote -v. Tells you that you have a fetch and a push. It's normal to have 2. This is what you want. You want to fetch and you want to push. You want them both to be called origin, and you want them both to be the correct URL. If you have this all right, great. All right. So now that we have our code, right? We have our repo set up. We have everything committed. There's nothing to be changed. So now the next thing we need to do is push it. All right. Out of those, if you're taking notes, this is the next one to write down. Git push origin master. And what that does is it will push to your it'll push the code to your GitHub unless you get an error like this. I did this intentionally to show you this error. A lot of students will have issues with this error and not understand what to do. Let's go through this. Rejected the push from master here to master over there. Failed to push some refs to your URL. Make sure this is correct. Updates were rejected because the remote contains work that you do not have locally. This is usually caused by another repository pushing to the same ref. You may want to first integrate the remote changes by running git pull before pushing again. And then tells you about git fast forwards and other things if you want more information. Not important here. Alright, so what is this telling you to do? The really important key piece is here, git pull. So when you run into this problem and you see this nasty error, you want to run git pull origin master first. Once you do that, you'll probably be thrown into this window. You've already seen me open this up a couple times. This is known as BIM. This is really confusing to new users of it. It has all sorts of modes and is just very confusing to figure out. It took me a very long time. Anyways, here's the magic secret key. If you ever get thrown into this window, write this down. You want to type :WQ. You'll see it showed up down here on the bottom. It seems like you'd be typing right here at the top, but you're not actually typing because you're not in insert mode. Again, not going to cover that much in this, but that's what you want to do. So :WQ, press enter, and it's gone. If you just don't remember that command or whatever, you can always Control-C, or you can just press the red X up here, kill it, and then go back to your repository. But running WQ, :WQ, will fix that for you. Basically, it means write the file and then quit. Okay, so now that we've pulled, it gives us a little bit of information. It says no common commits. That's a warning saying, hey, these don't seem to match. You guys have never joined these repositories together. Counting objects, and then it does some compressing, unpacking. It tells you where it's coming from. Again, confirm that's the right address. And then it says branch master on fetch head, which is our computer. This is our computer, fetch head. And then new branch called master in origin master. It just means that it's a new branch that's been made aware to it called origin master. Merge made by the recursive strategy. There's multiple different strategies if you want to read up on that later. And then it tells you what has changed. README added one line, which is demo. One file changed, one insertion, and again, here's that crazy create mode, and it just tells you I created the file called README. Okay, awesome. So running git status, you'll see nothing's changed. Now, we pulled, but we still haven't pushed. We tried to push, but we didn't successfully push because it failed. So we're going to run git push again. Git push origin master, and this time you'll see it does a bunch of stuff. It's counting objects, delta compressions, writing objects, tells you a bunch of stuff. Again, here's that magical URL. Make sure that's correct. It should be always correct if you got these things linked up together. And then it gives you some commit numbers, and then says we pushed from our master to your master. Awesome. So what does that mean? It means if I go over here and I refresh, we now have our files up here. This is the first way that you can use Git and GitHub together to get your code up on GitHub. Now, let's go through the second way. The second way is actually my preferred method, and it is to first create the repository on GitHub and then clone it down into Git. Alright, so let's do that. We're going to create a new repository, and we will call it demo2, because why not? Initialize it with README, press the button, and now we have a new repository. Okay, great. Now, GitHub also provides you with this handy little link down here that you can copy and paste, or you can click the convenient copy to clipboard button. What that does is it puts it inside your clipboard. So, if we now run, we need to go back to our root folder outside of our Git repository, and if we run git clone, and then we can copy in our URL, or you can type it out. It's okay if it does or does not have this .git on the end. They're both the same. Run that. It tells you it's cloning into this new folder. So now if we look at our folders, you will see that demo2 does in fact exist now. So let's cd into our demo2. Alright, so we now have our README file, which came from here. So we have a new folder, and we have a new file. Very convenient. Okay, so how do you get code in here? You can open this project up in Sublime, you can type things into it, all the normal stuff. For this example, I'm going to be really boring, and I'm going to copy this and drop it into the demo2 folder. Now, once we do that, we run git status, and you can see, oh, there's that annoying .ds store file. We can get rid of that again using the same method, or we can just push it up because it really doesn't do much. And then there's our script.js file. Again, it's telling you in red it needs to be added first. Alright, so this time we're going to do the whole thing together. Git add minus capital A, which adds the files. Now git commit minus M cloned example. Alright, it tells you that those files were created, and then we run our git push origin master. Now you notice that this time we did not have to run the git remote add with origin in the URL. The reason for that is when you clone something, it automatically sets up that that link for you, which is very convenient. One of the reasons why I like this method over the other. So when you if you run git remote, you will see that there is an origin there, and if you run git remote with the verbose flag, it will tell you that you have your fetch and push. So we have exactly the same thing here, but the difference that we did was we started with starting at GitHub instead of starting with your local copy. So those are the two different ways to use GitHub, and those are the commands that I use. So for those who didn't take notes earlier, shame on you. They are git add -a, git commit -m, and your note here. Here's the thing that happens occasionally. If you forget to put the quote, it gives you this really weird looking prompt. If you put another quote, it'll fix that for you. So if you ever get that, you forget to end your quotes, just put the quote in. And then git push origin master, which is going to tell me that there's everything up to date, nothing has changed. So those are your three commands: git add -a, git commit -m, some sort of comment, and git push origin master. Hope you like this video, and hopefully it helps in your course. If you have any other questions, please hit me up on Slack, and I'll see you next time.